Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of how to make your Turnouts DCC friendly. Last part we left off here. As you can see, the switch is fully deconstructed, frog is insulated, point rails taken off, throw bar taken out, and all your bottom ties cut out for the rewiring. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to reinstall the point rails. So this is obviously if you have a pre-Walther's Shinohira turnout or any other power routing turnouts where the points were bridged being the same polarity. DCC trains do not like that. They either trip the overload circuit breaker on the DCC system and it turns off, or the train just shuts off or stutters. So what you need for this is reconnect them back again just with simple rail joiners, and I'm using code 183 Atlas ones. So when we get back, I'll show you how that's going to look like. So when you have your joiners on, you can see they're about halfway on each end of the rail. So then you have a nice tight fit between the post point rails and the points. When I get back, I'm going to show you how to properly space your rails for the new tie. So I'm using 4mm by 6mm strip styrene, and I just wedge it between the outside stock rails and the point rails to give me about a 2mm gap on either side of the point rails, so when the switch is thrown, you have plenty of clearance for your wheel flanges. Next, what we're going to do is, either if you have your pre-cut PC board ties, or if you bought them in sheets from Amazon or eBay, you'll just cut them down to the appropriate width. I use a hacksaw. You can score it a few times with a sharp knife and break it off. That kind of gives you a little bit of this kind of flashing, which you don't want, so I just decided the quickest way is to do it with a hacksaw. So when we get back, I'll show you how that will look like. Alright, so I cut out my PC rail tie. I keep them quite short because I'm going to have a busy yard and I don't like them to be long sticking out. Unless you're going to be using ground throws or side-mounted switch motors, you want to leave them longer, either left or right. I just like to keep them smaller because the hole's going to be in the middle, and that's where the rod for my turnout throws are going to be. And what I also did was, because these are about a 0.5 millimeter lower than the actual rail ties, so in order to get good contact with the bottom of the point rails without them having being lower or higher than the adjoining stock rails, I cut out a bit of 0.5 millimeter cardstock to kind of shim it up below, like so. So all you're going to do is put this where your existing tie was, and put some flux on the rail and the PC board tie, and then solder it, and then I'll show you how that's going to look like. So when it's all soldered, you can see it's back together again, and it moves quite freely. This point rail is a little bit low, but it's not going to cause that much problems, just on the very tip. But you can see, very liberal application of solder, just so it washes above the web of the rail. You don't want any higher, so it interferes with your flanges. And then you're going to proceed to use a Dremel or a file, and you need to file the middle of the PC board tie to get rid of the copper to break the electrical continuity, or else you're going to create the same problem with the point rails you replaced. So when we get back to that, I'll show you how that looks like and how to start wiring on the underside of your turnout. So as you can see, I took the copper cladding of the PC board in the middle, so there's no more electrical connection. Now when we flip it over, what we're going to do is we're going to put flux on this part and this part and this part and this part of the rail joiner, and then we're going to do a dab of solder on each point just to keep the rails from moving and possibly the connection working loose over time, and also it allows for electrical conduct from these leads here through the rails because you have a soldered connection. So I'll show you how that looks like when that's done. So there you have it. 4 little dabs of solder on either side of the rail joiner. Provides a nice solid link and gives you that prototypical look of hand-laid switches without the cost. And there you go. So when we come back with this video, we will I will have this all wired up for you. Alright, so I got the wires all done. So positive rail, you can see it being soldered to the positive rail, passing the negative rail into the positive rail past the frog, and then negative rail past the positive to the negative. As you can see, these wires have to have a coating on them so you don't have electrical contact. The rail is jumping, or else you will have short in the system. And then right before the point rails, we just have positive to positive, negative to negative, small little wire. I just leave the sheathing on. You don't have to. You can even use a piece of metal rod and solder that directly. I just like using copper because it's a better conductor. Now I did say we're going to test the turnout with loco or few, but I actually forgot one more important step before we do that, and that is insulating these gaps. Mainly for the main reason is makes the rail look nicer, and also with expansion and contraction of your rail due to your environment where your layout is, you do not want these rails to move with the gaps, or this to move out of whack, or is going to cause alignment of the rail problems later, and it's going to cause issues. So I'm going to show you how to fill these gaps with styrene and super glue. I'll be right back with that. So what I basically did here, I took that 4x6 or 8 millimeter styrene strip. It's evergreen. I cut little slivers with a knife just big enough to fit in the gaps. I used a liberal amount of good crazy glue or super glue type model adhesive. It has to be super glue. It can't be plastic bond or model bond. It definitely has to be some type of form of super glue. I just the brand that I use, give me a second here guys, it's a really good brand. It's BSI Bob Smith Industries Instacure, and I use the medium, and it's cyanoacrylate is basically a strong modeler super glue. And I use the medium bonding, so it doesn't bond really quickly. It bonds in 5 to 15 seconds. So again, liberal dabbing in the rail cracks, and then you just shove the little slivers with your pliers and wait till they're dry, which they're dry now. And then you take your hobby knife and files, and then you basically file them down to the profile of the rail. So when we get back with this video, I'll show you how that will look like. So I don't know how well my cell phone will pick this up. I'll kind of get out of the light a little bit so it focuses. As you can see, I cut it flush with the top of the rail, so there's no humps or bumps. It's nice and flush. And then especially where your flanges of your wheels are going to be on the inside of your rails, you definitely want to, sorry for the glare guys and the lack of zoom, you definitely want a nice tight cut. You just keep on chiseling away with your knife on the insides of the rails, just so you scrape it away so it's nice and flush with the top of the rail and the flanges will pass. And then you want to take track eraser and just go over top really nicely, getting rid of any super glues, any other oils from your fingers from working on it. But basically, there you have it. That's a full overall haul of the switch. Obviously, if your point rails weren't power routing, I would suggest, if you can, do something like this to transmit power if you don't already have a connection transmitting power, or just take a little piece of wire and run it from the rail after the points to the bottom of the points. That will give you good electric conductivity to the points. Again, DCC locomotives do not like any type of major interruption of electricity through the rails, so you definitely want the entire turnout powered. So this entire turnout right now is powered, point rail to dead frog and beyond. So each of these rails would be powered. Only thing that is not powered is the frog, which I will wire a lead to one of these rails to power it when I install it in my layout. So that's going to be a future installment, part 3, of how you actually wire these to your bus line and on the layout. That's not going to be coming up for a few weeks because I'm still laying cork and not ready to lay my track just yet, but when that will come up is part 3. Okay guys, there's going to be a quick change to this video. Looking back now while editing, this part's already going to be at around 12 minutes. So we're going to leave the testing of the switch to a quick follow-up video in the next few days. So I hope you enjoyed part 2 of this video, and in the future part 4 really, of how to actually wire it to your layout. So as always guys, thank you for watching, liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. And I'll be posting a video in a few days of testing the switch to make sure it is functioning properly. Till then, take care.